Uh, so, my first question. In the 90s, Kevin Martin's not been all about making music. You've been making a lot of music, but you also worked on the other side of camera, if I can say so. You've been a journalist for probably the most important left field music magazine in the world, for The Wire. You've been doing some important work in the Virgin Records with compiling some very influential compilations back then. But ever since the late 90s, you've only been making music and seem to be only interested in making music. What influenced this kind of switch for you?
To be honest, I only started writing about music because I was so broke as a musician, and my girlfriend at the time was paying all the bills. And it was about the only thing I felt that I could do that could generate money, that I had contacts. I knew the editor of The Wire, I knew a contributor to The Wire called Chris Bond, Beaver Kopf. And when I lived in a small town in the south coast of England as a young kid, his regular columns were a lifeline to me. I discovered so much music through his writing. So when I moved to London, I actually just started a label up called Pathological, and I just got his address, his home address, and turned up on his doorstep with a record, which was funny because it was about 10 o'clock at night in King's Cross, and he handled it really cool, and from that point on we became good friends. And like I said, making music that isn't commercial, very obviously, is a total war, really. And going through a period where I couldn't pay any bills or anything, it was just London sucks you dry. And I felt compelled that I had to do something to generate cash, and that was writing. I felt I could write. I liked writing, although I always have a mistrust of the word with music. I think in a way it can detract and it can take the magic out of music. But at the same time, people who write well, like Kojo Eshin, Simon Reynolds, etc., are amazing craftsmen at what they do. But still, without a shadow of doubt, all that matters to me is music. Writing was absolutely secondary in every way, shape or form.
Okay, then just going back to the 90s for a little bit more. Back in the 90s, you had a lot of musical projects going on. You had God, which was like a 10 people rotating lineup, orchestra. You had Ice, which was like a more contracted version of God. Then you had electronic projects like Techno Animal, Sidewinder. But ever since maybe the beginning of the new century, you've been focusing much more on the electronic music. And originally you were a saxophone player, so can you explain this kind of switch?
Well, production just took me over. The whole idea of the studio is like a magical area. It's like the sonic sorcery that's possible with getting lost in sound. I loved the whole disorientation of sound. Very quickly became an obsession with me. And actually, it was working on God's first album with John Zorn in New York, where we had such a lot of material, components to mix down, and it was getting so flattened by the sheer density of sound that he suggested we dub out one of the tracks. And it was just through doing that mix alone that I was like, actually, I love this. And just, if you love music, it's impossible not to, for me, it was impossible not to become fascinated by how you can treat it and how you can, just remix it, literally. There's so many innovations came from Jamaica, and for me, I got bored with bands, and I still am to a large extent. It just seems about so many other things rather than the music. It's about personality and it's about entertainment. And I got bored of seeing bands who you think are doing something special on one night, but you see them night after night and realize it's all stage managed anyway. And for me, there's a purity in sound and in dub music. When I went, just after I moved to London about 15 years ago, one of the first experiences I had was a sound clash between two reggae sound systems. I'd never been to anything like this in my life. It took apart every preconception I had about how music could be performed live. It was two sound systems opposite each other in a room with zero light, one light bulb above each mixer. There was no stage, no applause between shows, between songs, sorry. And basically it was so intense sonically that it felt like my internal organs were being rearranged. And for me it was like, well, this is so dramatically pure in every shape and form about music. It just removes all the bullshit and just gets straight through to the core of why I love sound and music. So for me, there was no turning back. And concentrating on the Bug, I have other projects very active at the moment, not just the Bug. But the Bug thing took off in a way projects I'd done before never had. I started the Bug at a time in my life where, again, it was the only other time apart from the time I mentioned to you when I started writing, where literally I was so broke it wasn't fucking funny. And it's the only time in my life where I've thought about giving up music. And my ex at the time wanted to leave London. She hated London. She hated the rat race existence that is London, and tried to convince me to leave as well. And I said, look, give me one more chance. If it doesn't work out, fuck it, we'll leave. And that was when I started the Bug.
But let me stop you there. Your first album as the Bug was put out on Word Sound, if I recall correctly.
No. Okay, sorry, yeah, okay, you're talking about that one, yeah.
And it was actually, I mean, very removed from what you actually do as Bug today. Yeah. It was much more, well, first it used live instruments, then it was a concept album that, if I recall well, was referencing Francis Ford Coppola's Conversation.
That's correct.
And it was much more dub-oriented versus the today's Bug that's much more dancehall and maybe dubstep even. So how did that change to dancehall come? I mean, obviously you've answered half the question just
The first
now,
album I see as a bit of a freak occurrence. It's very experimental, obviously. The only reason that album occurred, well, two reasons. One, I was very good friends with Skiz at Word Sound and I really liked what he was doing. He was obsessed by On-Use sound and he was obsessed by Wu-Tang Clan, and the mixture of that was right up my street. And as far as I was concerned, I was really into what he was doing. And he kept saying to me, you should record a record for me. And I just got paid a stupid amount of money by Warner Brothers to make a record, which ended up being Bad Blood by Ice. And they gave me money for equipment, and I'd never engineered on my own. I'd fucked around with 4-track recorders when I first started making music, but I was always working with Justin, and Justin was doing most of the engineering, and basically inspired me in many ways as well, working with him. But I didn't want to be responsible for mixing down the Ice album straight away with all this new equipment, because I was scared. I was scared that I wasn't able to do justice to it. So for me, the Bug album was just a way of learning how to use the equipment myself and doing it on my own. I knew what it was all capable of. So it was really an absolutely experimental approach.
And then you just basically started putting out singles that were pure, more or less pure dancehall, ragamuffin stuff.
But it's not pure dancehall. If you play it to Jamaicans...
that was to be my next question, but sure, go ahead. For me, why did I go? You know, it's almost illogical. Why I like ragga, it doesn't really make sense. No. Why I was turned on to it, it's got more to do with my nature of being, what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for. Difficult, contrary. Contradictory, yeah. No one I knew liked ragga. The only person I ended up meeting who was in vogue at the time.
Yeah, well, at the time it had a shit reputation because of Shabba.
Yeah.
And when I first heard ragga, I thought it was as cheesy as everyone else because I was a dub snob, and I got into reggae very early on through people like John Peel, and basically, when I first heard ragga, I thought it was shit, but it challenged my own preconceptions, and then I heard a rhythm called the Street Sweeper rhythm, which absolutely blew my head off. And then I was like, if that track can be that good, there's got to be other stuff like that. I mean, 95% of all music is shit, dispensable, throwaway bullshit. The 5% that's hardcore in every genre is amazing. So it's just a case of locating that 5%. And ragga, what I loved about it as I started getting more and more into it, was just the fact that you never knew what the next 7-inch would sound like. And it would challenge all your own preconceptions about music, and it was so inventive. Black music generally, I think, is more inventive than most music made by white people. I think that Jamaican audiences are much more difficult to please. They want the next thing. They don't want to look back at the last thing. And that's my problem with guitar music in the last 5 years, is whenever I hear anything with a guitar in it, generally it reminds me of something that's been done before and mostly better. So that's why I've stayed interested in electronic music, because it always seems to be this movement ahead. Although lately it's been difficult too, like hip hop and dancehall in the last couple of years, musics which I'm passionate about. Yeah, for me, it's been a bad year for both.
Since you've mentioned hip-hop, Techno Animal in particular, but some of your other projects did kind of rely on hip-hop ways of thinking and philosophies.
Absolutely, yeah.
And being from the UK, both you and Justin Broderick, what's your opinion on the UK hip-hop? Because as far as I can tell from the outside, UK has been great with house, with drum and bass, with ragga and dancehall lately, with dubstep, but UK's never had at least from an outsider point of view, never had an influential hip-hop scene. How come?
Well, the problem is that the same as most countries that try to emulate American hip-hop, it's trying to copy something in a way it should never, it's been too reverential. But actually the grime scene is the best hip-hop scene to ever have come out of the UK, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, as far as everybody here is concerned, I think as well.
But the problem with that is it was so insular, it couldn't grow. And the MCs involved of it, partly through choice, partly through greed, partly through wanting to be the next 50 Cent at its worst, were too quick to try and just grab as much money as possible and not still work on the foundations of the scene. At the moment there's a sort of resurgence of very good grime, but for the last 2 or 3 years it's been totally eclipsed by dubstep. And it was obvious with dubstep. Anyone can fucking make dubstep that's got access to sampling a reggae record and can sit in front of a computer. Whereas getting access to amazing grime MCs was fucking difficult. Because that scene doesn't really want to know about outsiders, you know. And I think grime, I think people like Dizzy, Flowdan, Taliban Trim, those people are immaculate MCs. They're as good as any American hip-hop MC I've ever heard. And the funny thing is, speaking to someone like Dalek, who obviously are passionate hip-hop people, they laugh about British hip-hop, they take the piss out of it. But when I played them grime, they were really into it. They recognised there was something special in grime.
But
you know?
That was exactly the reaction of most of the press and most of the people that I know back in the day when Dizzy's first album dropped. I mean, it was like, oh, so this is what the UK hip-hop should be about.
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe 1 year later, dubstep finally broke it big in the media. And lately, your own tunes have cropped up more frequently in dubstep mixes all over the internet that I can tell. But still, most of your music is more about ragga than dubstep, as far as
I don't consider what I do dubstep.
Yeah,
I'm saying it endlessly now. It's becoming like a repetitive mantra. Dubstep's helping me without a shadow of doubt. But it's only because a lot of the producers in that scene have become very good friends. And it was Code 9 that introduced me to that scene. And I just recognised in that scene there was similar interests to what I had, or to what we'd been doing with Techno Animal and what Mickey had been doing with Scorn. So for me it's like I'm happy to exploit the interest in the dubstep sector, and I like a lot.
You're not considering changing your music to fit the mold.
No. In a way, a lot of people say that my stuff was dubstep before it existed, and I would never say that because my music was never made to be functional. Dubstep is made to be a function. The worst part of dubstep and what it's become now, with this new second wave of producers, is becoming a functional dance music. I don't make music to be functional. I like people to groove the fuck out to it, but I don't make it to be just another area of dance music. I want to make great tracks that will make a difference to people's lives, or people will become passionate about. I'm not happy just to make a time signature background to people's lives.
Which is actually a bit strange hearing like the track like Poison Dart being so gladly embraced by the dubstep scene.
Yeah, for me, I'm shocked.
It's non-danceable, it's very aggressive.
Well, it's very danceable, but it's very aggressive as well.
Yeah, but I mean non-danceable in a dubstep way. I mean, you definitely do not go the usual first song structure and then the beat structure when you talk about dubstep in that track. So
no, for me, it's a hip hop track.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously, when I came up with it, I see it as it's like my version of hip hop meets dancehall. You know.
Okay, maybe a little bit of a personal question here. Since you've had such a vibrant, fruitful cooperation with Justin Broderick in the 90s, since his nervous breakdown and Godflesh disbanding, his basically
nervous
announced.
Breakdown.
Well, that was the news that he suffered a nervous breakdown, and that was why the American tour of Godflesh was cancelled in 2003. So anyway, I'm glad that you say it wasn't a nervous breakdown. But anyway, it's been widely basically announced that he's going to be focusing only on Yesu and Final from that point on, which meant an end for Techno Animal and other things.
To be honest, we haven't talked about it.
Yeah, that
it's just that we both got really wrapped up in our individual projects, and we both had a lot of personal stuff to deal with in our private lives, not between each other.
Sure, yeah.
And I certainly hope we will work together again. And we've always talked about it. And actually, Cult of the
Species.
Yeah, that would have been the next thing. We hated the fucking name Techno Animal. It's a shit name, and we wanted to give it up when Matador signed us, but they said they wouldn't sign us if we gave the name up.
You had a brand going at the time.
Yeah, but who knew the brand? There was no one.
You had the record on Virgin, so.
Yeah, but it didn't sell anything.
Okay.
So for us, we wanted to change the name, and Justin was like a brother to me for God knows how many years, you know, and I totally respect him, and I miss working with him a great deal.
Well, hopefully you guys will get together.
Yeah, I certainly hope we will. I mean, we're still in touch, not as often
well, he's
or as much.
moved to Wales.
Yeah, he moved to North Wales. Yeah, but no, it's never been talked about that we wouldn't work. We said we both felt Techno Animal had gone as far as it could without becoming a caricature. And we were pissed
you went
off.
Out with a bang, anyway.
Yeah, well, we were pissed off what happened with the Brotherhood of the Bomb. Hip hop people thought it was too noisy. Noise people thought it was too hip hop.
Obviously.
And it's only since we've stopped working on it that everyone's talking about it. It's like I've been playing a lot going to France a lot at the moment.
But you actually gone through or at least a similar, if not the same situation with ISIS Bad Blood. I mean, it was the same thing. I've read you say things like people hated this record, people who worked on the record hated it.
I also think it's the worst record I've ever made. I think I lost the plot when I was making that record. I think I got totally lost in the album and lost my way. I think my vocals are pretty shit on it.
Well, your rapping could use some working out.
Yeah, you're not
but
kidding.
I think you're being a bit harsh. I mean,
yeah, I think lyrically, the lyrics are all right, but I think that, I got lost because the standard of the people I invited on the record were so good, and I felt intimidated, and I almost tried to rival them in some weird way, and I failed. And for me, it's a failed experiment. Okay. The first Ice album, I'm very happy with, but that one, I think I personally fucked it up.
Okay, 2 more questions because we're running out of time.
Sure.
First, being a saxophone player, even though as far as I can recall, you didn't start playing sax because of the jazz musicians. It was actually something else. Or
yeah, it was through people like Theatre of Hate and the Psychedelic Furs and people like that.
So, who's your favorite dead saxophone player?
Jazz sax player.
Dead saxophone.
Dead?
Deceased. Yeah. I mean,
obviously Albert Ayler, John Coltrane are both amazing.
Okay.
But Pharoah Sanders was probably my favourite saxophone player. Peter Brotzman, people who are still alive and still working.
Yeah. Okay, who's your favourite alive?
Well, I just answered that really. It's Peter Brotzman, Pharoah Sanders, Evan Parker, amazing players. I love what they do. I haven't listened to jazz so much in the last few years. The bug's taken me over in many ways. It's just assumed its own life. in a way that I just didn't expect. I really didn't expect. And,
and as for the last question, the Bugs seems to have become a bit more than just Kevin Martin doing his thing with other people just being guests. The new album has a very large selection of MCs and toasters on it, and I've actually noticed that one of the tunes is called Ganja, which is a bit strange for you, being such a widely known straight edge person.
yeah,
So-
that's why Ganja's not on the album, because
So it's not going to be on the album?
no, it's going to be a single. It's going to be the
Right.
next single, and actually, yeah, it doesn't matter. But no, it's not going to be on the album.
But
For that very
my
reason, I
basic
felt
question
hypocritical
is
about
are
putting it
you
on the
are you
album.
expanding what the Bug should be about, or is it still going to be a very singular vision of yours? And
No,
then,
it's absolutely my vision. And if
Okay.
you listen to the album, even though there's
I
a
hope you will.
huge range of MCs on it, there's an atmosphere that was unmistakably linked with me. It's a very, very heavy album, but without being noisy. It's a very intense listen. And I think for me, it's the only record I could have made at this point. I'm very proud of it. And
Okay.
I feel it's moved ahead where Pressure left off.
right. Okay, and now for the real last question. I've seen that you have actually another project that's called
Yeah.
We're Done in like 2 minutes. The Cult of the 13th Hour.
Yeah.
Is it in any significant way different to the Bug?
Yeah, it's very different.
Okay.
It's very, I mean, I tried to keep it quiet that I was involved, and somehow it got leaked all over the fucking place because I didn't want it to be judged on me and my past. And for me, it's literally trying to open myself out. It's to find a signature sound that I can work with that's actually very accessible, with warped sort of melodies in it, and a depth of sound, and an instant rhythm, and minimal. All these things that I'm normally not associated with, but to have a message on top from Space Ape that's absolutely potent and blunt and absolutely political. It's to try and see if it's possible to merge something that's accessible and almost beautiful with a lyric and intensity of vocal that's ugly and in your face. And it's a real challenge, and that's why we both wanted to do it. And both we worked together so well. So I'm being told I'm going to miss a plane.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Since you have to go, we'd
It's
better
really
stop
nice
here.
to meet someone who actually knows what they're talking about as well. Thank you.
See you next time.